Today is a first here on Locked on Buckeyes because it's time to analyze and hand out grades for Ryan Day's time as the head coach at The Ohio State University. We go over offense, defense, and we provide an overall grade for Ryan Day during today's episode of Locked on Buckeyes.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes for the Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is a Thursday, June 8th in the year 2023, and today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege, and when you enter promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. During today's show, we are going to be analyzing, dissecting, and handing out grades for Ryan Day's time as the head coach specifically of your Ohio State Buckeyes. And here, once again, maybe the first time since the end of spring practice that myself and my guy Jeff Hunt, a frequent contributor of Locked on Buckeyes, have done a show together, had a fun, quick 20-minute pre-show conversation that wasn't about Buckeye football, which is why I can't wait to hear about Jeff and what he has to say about Ryan Day today. Jeff, welcome back to Locked on Buckeyes.
Hey, thanks for having me on as usual, man. It is always a pleasure. And this is you caught me at a great time. Like I told you before the show, I've moved on past recruiting. I've moved on past signing day. I've moved on past the portal. I've moved on past, the mourning process of the 2022 season. I'm hopeful for 2023. The spirits are starting to come back up like they always do. And I'm ready to go. And I was probably as positive as I'm going to be until this time next year.
The positives, Jeff, let's try to stay positive. But when we think about handing out grades to Ryan Day, there are positives. There's pros. You see it in the rundown on the show. They're on the YouTube. There's pros. There's also cons. I try to hang on to those positives because, Jeff, when I think about the cons and the negatives of Ryan Day's time at Ohio State, they sting. And I'm not just talking about a couple losses Thanksgiving weekend over the past couple years. I'm not even really thinking about that Clemson loss in 2019. It's more in recent memory. Some of those negatives and the cons sting. So, Jeff Hunt, I try to hang on to the positives so I keep my mood up.
Yeah, it's tough too. I mean, we have we'll start off. That's a credit to Ryan Day. We expect a national championship since he's been there, which that's a huge positive right there. That's a huge compliment. But the truth is that, I think most of Buckeye Nation feels like we've had the team to get there and get over the top. But the slip-ups have been kind of inexcusable along the way. And then, yes, he's put up good numbers and a lot of flash, and, the nationwide media has really, loved his teams. But as viewers week in and week out of every minute of the game, I think realistically, a lot of us see the downfall. We see I think that's what we forget is Ryan Day is a young coach. And when I say young coach, this is his first team. He's in season 5, I believe. And we see that, even though he just happens to be coaching the biggest, athletic program in the world. So it's kind of it's a tough spot to be in. But like I told you, he gets paid to be in a tough spot, and he can take a little criticism from me and you.
Ryan Day's overall record at Ohio State is 45-6. That does include the 3 games that he coached during the 2018 season when he was the acting head coach and Urban Meyer was suspended for the first 3 games in that year. Take that away, Jeff. That's the first of the 4 full seasons, which does include the 2020 season, which was shortened. 42-6 in 4 seasons as the full-time head coach. It's weird that we're going to be so negative about a man that has a 42-6 record during full seasons. I know Jeff Hunt and myself very well. I know where this conversation is going to go in a little bit. But overall, an 88% winning percentage, Jeff, people are going to say we're too harsh. I just say we're realistic and have a proper view of what's going on in Columbus. But 42-6, 45-6, it's weird, man. Because in reality, most sports, you're saying, oh my, he's a Hall of Famer. I don't know Buckeye fans really think that about Ryan Day. If he retired right now, went to the NFL, if he would be a football Hall of Famer, because he's just not viewed like that. Too many of us.
Yeah, I tell you what, about 4 months ago, a lot of us were ready for him to move on, right then. Sure, there was a lot of overreaction, but again, it's the sting of I know, and it's crazy. It's hard to explain. Like, your listeners are going to understand this, but it's hard to explain to the normal world. Like, the reason that we are so passionate and care so much and dial in on and scrutinize these games is because they lose so little that we can remember every single play of every single loss. And so it stings a little more, and that's what puts us up there with Georgia, Alabama, these programs that we can't afford one loss in the season. Like, last year was couldn't afford a loss season. A couple years ago couldn't afford a loss. So they stand out so much more, because our expectations aren't 7-4. They're undefeated every year. So we scrutinize them a little bit more, but it also, there's a lot of the wins that there's some issues with too. I can remember distinctly an Iowa game last year to where Iowa kicked their butts for at least a half. I think I counted up 9 or 11 series on offense. Ohio State got their teeth kicked in. Iowa's offense was just so terrible that it didn't matter in the end. And it all looks good on a box score or a highlight, or even when they showed on College Game Day Final on ESPN, they blur through it Buckeyes run through another one. But when you're watching it play by play, you realize, some of the shortcomings, of the game, that's what we do as an analyst of something that we're so passionate about and care so much about.
You think about games, Jeff, that kind of sting, or maybe even a win that sticks out in our mind. And I bring this up quite a bit. We're talking about C.J. Stroud and how the beginning of his career would have been the way we view it would have been altered if there was simply a loss week 1, 2021 against Minnesota. I will go down. I'll say it for years. If Mo Ibrahim does not get hurt, Ohio State loses that game. Absolutely. And Ohio State's coming up, and they start the season 0-2, assuming they still follow that up 0-2 against lose the following week against Oregon. Mo Ibrahim's injury was a savior for how we viewed Stroud in the beginning. He was coached by Ryan Day. So even some of the wins, you mentioned Iowa, I mentioned Minnesota, some of the wins still stick out in our mind. Some of them are on offense. Some of them are on defense. Some of them are overall strength and conditioning that, Jeff, I'm going to talk about next week on the show, because I got some words about this team's strength and conditioning program. Said it last year. I'm going to say it again next week on the show. So little teaser for next week. You don't want to miss it. I got some stuff to say that I'm sure listeners of Locked on Buckeyes will definitely enjoy. But we got some grades coming for you today. Offense, defense, and the overall grade. And I know in this, some pros and cons will come up. Jeff, you're the guest. The floor is yours. Offensive grade for Ryan Day's coach teams at Ohio State. Where do you stand?
So this is a tough one. I know what everybody's expecting, and I know what the stats say, and I do. And because I respect the stats, I gave him a B+. And everybody's thinking this is the best offense that Ohio State's ever had, and by far. And give me all the quarterback stats. Well, essentially, it says he a lot of the stats are on teams with less talent. They're not quite putting up the same. He does have some outlier games. I'm not saying that, but he's also had some remarkable players. And then what I really notice is it's his offense is really hinge on how good these excellent quarterbacks have been. And then of course the receiving core has just been beyond reproach. But I'm they don't dominate the ball on the line of scrimmage most games. The running attack has kind of stepped back, every year since, Dobbins left. Just as far as the entire attack and, everything about it. They get pushed around by the physical teams. Like I brought up Iowa. We know what we saw against the team up north a couple times, so I don't think the stats tell the whole story on this team, in a nutshell. Now he's done a really good job with the game plans going into the playoff games. They've performed very well, win or lose, they perform very well, but there's a lot of times to where he kind of he gets stuck, and I don't know if he's a little stubborn or maybe doesn't see it, or maybe needs some coaching help, whatever it is. But you'll see a game and you're like, how many times can we see one more screen pass? You know what I mean? How many times can we try this? How many times can we try that? But the overall talent has bailed this team out so many times. Okay, let's just throw it 75 yards, or let's let, when it was Justin Fields, maybe he'll escape and run for 50. Then we kind of forget about a drive that was stalling out. So the offensive numbers really don't match, the consistency that I need. Now, of course, I appreciate how good they've been, and some of the games have been remarkable. I think of the last couple of Michigan State games to where I'm like, okay, that's almost perfect.
Yeah.
It's not like it's all been bad, but when they've needed it, they couldn't score against Alabama. There was just times to where, like, even let's talk about the Georgia game just a little bit. Like, if you can bear down and get some first downs and get some and chew some clock and do some of those things you need or big plays, like it's hard to complain about that stuff. But that's as high as I could go with it. He's obviously a good offensive mind, but I don't know if the offensive play calling is where I think it could be, considering the talent that they supposedly have on the field.
Jeff, we are very similar. Once again, this is no surprise to me at all. I'm just a notch higher than you. I went A-, and I wanted to go B+, but I couldn't go that low, because even though there has been issues in the run game since J.K. Dobbins left, Ryan Day has found a way for the offense to still be one of the best in college football, and he's kind of overcome those errors in the running game with a pretty good passing attack. So I'm being maybe too nice, but A-. Now, I'm probably going to get some pushback. Why not A? Why not A+? There has been a drop-off in the running game. I think that's a clear-cut thing. Ryan Day has not brought in a really good running back that has been elite for Ohio State. That's a fact. Outside of J.K. Dobbins and a couple times Trey Sermon went off, Trey Sermon didn't go off till the end of the season. In a shortened year where you needed a veteran running back to kind of just go off and take over. Once he got his feet under him and understood the offense, the rest is history. And so that's 2020. Trey Sermon was the guy that they brought in, not via the high school recruiting, but the transfer portal. Great, cool. Dobbins, Sermon. What else is there? Trying to start Master Teague when nobody believed Master Teague was the starting running back at Ohio State. Is that Alford? Is it Day? Okay, there's a question there, but it's still an error to me in the coaching in the running back room. Playing Henderson and Maya Williams last year, and they were clearly hurt. I get that they're the best guys. They're clearly hurt. I think that hurt the running game a year ago. I just kind of question some of the running game stuff, and not having a balanced offense, more balanced, really hurts Ohio State's offense, really hurts Ryan Day in the grand scheme of things. And Jeff, I've had people that are down south, a host of Locked On Auburn, ended up saying, I don't know how good of a X's and O's coach Ryan Day is. And I'm thinking, this guy only watches one game, maybe 2 games a year. Definitely it came after the Michigan game. Biggest game of the year. Talk about this, talk about that. And what do? The X's and O's, the in-game adjustments sometimes weren't there. If people in the South are saying and they're popping in for one game, what do you think Ohio State fans are saying, Jeff, when we're watching every single game under a microscope? I like Ryan Day. I'm being nicer to him now than I would have been, like Jeff would have been at the beginning of this calendar year. But I like Ryan Day. But I still believe there's room to grow with the offense, Jeff. The run game is where I stop. Or excuse me, where I start. Start working and fixing the running game. If you have an elite running back and he's in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy at the end of the season, there's a good chance the Buckeyes will be a favorite team by some to win the national championship.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree with everything you say. I mean, like I say, there's basically it boils down to this team is carried a lot by talent. Now that's most of the great teams. Like the Ohio State's not the only team that talent prevails. Like what Georgia does on defense, for instance, is the same as what Buckeyes do on offense, as far as like they just reload with so much talent that like they can make mistakes and overcome it. And that's what Ohio State's offense have done. But I think we're sitting here talking about this. We're not, I shouldn't say worried, but we're not talking about how do we figure out how to beat Northwestern consistently. We're talking about how do we win national championships. So I've always said this, Jay.
People will start laughing if you were worried about beating Northwestern.
That's what I'm saying.
Every single year.
I've always said, like, if you like winning, cool bowl games and getting a trophy like the Rose Bowl or whatever, and don't mind losing a couple games, you're fine. Like, I'm probably not your guy. That's not what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? I'm talking about we got, how do we get past Georgia? How do we get out past Alabama?
Side note, real quick. Do you think those are the only 2 teams Ohio State should be shooting to be better than, Alabama and Georgia?
No, I think Clemson's still on the list. I think because of they don't have that, quarterback like Ohio State's had a couple times. I think Clemson's still there. And then USC is clearly going to be awesome. We don't know what's going to happen out there in Oklahoma. Texas, appears to have some serious momentum. Notre Dame's going to be really, really good. As far as like this year, we're going to find out how good they are when they play Ohio State. But I think there's 6 or 7 teams. And I think, honestly, though, with college football, it's a whole different conversation we can have. I think that's about it right now. It's kind of weird, kind of a weird spot they're in. But they need to worry about other teams. But I think they only have 2 to 3 teams at most that are above their level consistently.
Jeff, defensive grades coming up here right now at all listeners and viewers. Jeff, once again, the floor is yours. I should have gone with this one first to give us more time.
No,
because I know it's going to get heated. Where you at right now with defensively? The defensive coach.
So I went with
Ryan
a C.
Day.
I went with a C-, and here's why. I give Ryan Day credit for the early years. I know that like they weren't all his quote unquote recruited players, but they did. They did put up, and then I can't overlook what they did to Clemson in that playoff game. That they won in 20, and some things like that. But overall, the scheme has been bad. The players just aren't there. And I hate ridiculing players like this, but like we just saw the NFL draft this year and there's no Ohio State players anybody's begging for on defense, going in the NFL draft, which is insane for a team that just went to the college football playoffs and not have defensive players in the draft. I think tells you everything you need to know about the depth. My biggest thing is, and we've talked about it a couple times the last 2 years, they come into the year and as soon as we see them play, we see it. Like as soon as we see him play, we're like, this guy can't do this. The defensive back techniques are terrible. So like Ryan Day had all summer, to see this and couldn't correct it or didn't correct it either way. And we see it game 1 and we know it's going to be a problem all year. And it was. The last 2 years have been absolute travesty and they've cost them any shot at a national title because of what they've done. And so C-, basically I give them credit for your winning games. And some of the early stuff, but if you asked me last year, to me, that's the last 2 years has just been basically an F defense.
Yeah, it's been bad. It's been bad. I heard one man say the Ohio State's defensive coordinator is getting paid $2 million. Ohio State should have a top 5 defense. Well, that man, who's the head coach of the defense, was brought in by Ryan Day. And clearly the defense that was supposedly supposed to be a top 10 defense a year ago was not a top 10 defense. Is that all on Ryan Day's shoulders? No. But do believe some of that has to go on Ryan Day because Ryan Day is recruiting the players to come in. And the player development, it does fall on his shoulders. So, yep. Jeff, you go C-. I'm going C+. I can't go B- or B. I understand 2019, 2020, especially that if you just stop and say Clemson 2019, Clemson 2020, That's how the season is for the Buckeyes. Really close in 2019, really good season in 2020. I don't think many Buckeye fans are even mad about the outcome of the national championship game against Alabama. That was a really good Alabama team in Ohio State. Granted, didn't have some players in that game due to COVID, but Ohio State I still don't think would have been up to par to beat that Alabama team because they were just good, man. Good across the board. But I'm going C-. It's hard. Can you consistently stop the run? Okay. I don't think so. Can you consistently stop the pass? Well, you had a quarterback in J.J. McCarthy who's not a good thrower, but threw some good throws and beat Ohio State through the air against Michigan a year ago. So I'm questioning that too. Are you developing players? Not really. Are you putting a lot of guys in the NFL from the defensive side of the ball? Not really. Maybe I should have gone to F, Jeff. I don't know, bro. But maybe
you had a running back starting at linebacker.
I mean, I don't understand what's going on with this team right now where Ohio State has a standard. The standard on defense, produce and develop elite linebackers, not happening. You can say whatever you want about Tommy Eichenberg. Eichenberg's a great college linebacker. I don't believe he's going to be a great NFL linebacker.
He can't play for Georgia.
Changes, no, he cannot. D-line, are you developing the elite defensive ends? I'm not even saying you got to be a Chase Young, quick first step. Just elite defensive ends to be determined. DBs, complete drop-off. So maybe my C+, excuse me, maybe it should have been a C or a C-, because the more I talk about it, the more frustrated I get because this team has dropped off drastically on the defensive side of the ball.
Oh, yeah, it's been – and they've got pushed around by their rival. I mean, pushed around. Like it hadn't even close to Utah blew their doors off. Like I say, Iowa beat them up last year. Iowa just can't score. Minnesota, we took it to them. Like, it's just over and over. Oregon, they couldn't stop anything against Oregon. Like, it all, if Ohio State had an average offense, they would be a very average team. Like, that's how bad the defense has been. And I'm with you. Ryan Day's the overseer, so yeah, we're putting all this on him. So, again, this year is going to tell a lot, but all the hype and talk and tweets about, oh, we got a top 5, when I say we, like, coming out of the coaching staff, oh, this should be a top 5. Well, that's easy to say in June. Like, let's see, like, can you dig in? Can you get stops? They don't scare quarterbacks. They don't punish people physically. Teams are still. That's what I mean. You want to talk about what happened in the Georgia game? At the end of the Georgia game, Georgia's offense wasn't beat up. So they had energy and they went down, and that's what cost them. Like, there's no punishment. There's no. I mean, Michigan could have played 2 games last year. They were so fresh at the end of that game. And it's it's over and over and over. We see this, that eventually it's caught up with them. It just keeps catching up with them.
Jeff, you are someone that just now compared and said, hey, Tommy Eichenberg couldn't play for Georgia. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. How many Ohio State players on defense could play for the Georgia Bulldogs?
I keep saying not one. Even last year, they're like, now, do I think that, here's part of the issue. Do I think that if they had, Styles or Hicks or some of these guys down there, could they develop them into that? I absolutely do. But that's not what's happening. The team that I saw on the field last year, I don't know, Harrison, they could probably do something with them. JTT could probably fit in there somewhere, but they don't need them. They're definitely not starting. They're not their stars. I mean, and that's just the facts of it. I know we're comparing them to Georgia, but even Alabama, for us to not have a defensive back that we talk about next year should be in the top, 10 of the NFL draft is the biggest change since Ryan Day's got there. Like, that's the number one thing that I've saw is, like, for us to not have a lock, absolute locked in, top NFL defensive back. Just, I don't understand that.
I don't either. You have these conversations, DBU, LBU. I don't know if there's a guy at Ohio State, linebacker or defensive back, if you look at the top defenses from even a year ago or projected to be the top defenses in the upcoming season, a linebacker or a DB saying that guy's an automatic starter. I don't know, man. And outside of JT on the D-line, I'm a big Michael Hall Jr. guy. The coaches have limited – he hasn't really produced that way consistently. Like, JT Tuimoloau needs to work on consistency. Michael Hall Jr. needs to work on consistency as well. I don't know, man. Like, it's weird. I even talked to Ryan Roberts, our guy, about, like, the Buckeye preseason draft stuff. But I'm curious to hear what Ryan has to say about Tuimoloau and Eichenberg and Michael Hall Jr. and Proctor and Ransom, because Ryan's honest. This is why I love him. I guarantee you Ryan's going to be like, Jay, this is a big drop-off on defense for Ohio State, which falls into why Jeff and I are so harsh on Ryan Day coach defenses while Ryan Day's been the head coach. The drop-off is there. It's evident, and we see it easily in the NFL draft. And
he really seems not to see it. Like, he really seems to not have a handle on the defense at all. Like, from everything that we see, like, and I don't know, maybe he's like, Gundy out in Oklahoma State to where he like, I'm coaching the offense. Like, y'all worry about the defense. Like, he's famous for that, which is fine, but that still falls on your shoulders.
Yes.
We will learn a lot this year, but we had the same conversation a year ago and nothing really changed. It's that they can't get teams off the field when they need to. Every good quarterback they play hurts them. And there's not a ton of good quarterbacks in college football, and every one of them hurts them.
Overall, great, Jeff. We're almost up out of time. Where are you standing right now with Ryan Day?
I went with a B-. Okay. I give him credit because the record is impeccable. I do like him. The talent level seems to it definitely on offensive side of the ball, but overall, like, the talent level didn't just drop off the map, when Urban left. Again, he does win the games. He's been the biggest. The reason that I give him, some breathing room is that he was up for every playoff game he's been in.
Mm-hmm.
He did not, again, the Alabama game was a fluke, but to get past Clemson, like, it's hard to remember that now, like, what a big deal that was. But I give him a lot of credit for getting these teams up for that game. But then, I could go on and on about the regular games that he ought to be getting his team up for that he's not. So his team seem to be, they get pushed around a little. I'm not going to, use the S word on them, but they do get pushed around a little. They don't control the games. And again, he's let talent kind of bail him out of all this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, as an Ohio State fan, 45-6 or 43-6 is way better than I would have expected when Urban left. So, as of now, I'm gonna keep riding with it. But I tell you, this season's pretty much it for me personally, as far as like how much I'm gonna quote unquote tolerate.
Jeff Hunt went B-. I go B+. It is kind of similar to what Jeff had to say. As drastic as some of the comments as maybe have been on a negative side as Jeff and I have been discussing today, if you give me another coach in the country that says, hey, you come in after a Hall of Famer in Urban Meyer and you have this record, 6 losses, we can pinpoint them, we know when they are, and you're still in the running to be one of the best teams in the country every single year, you have a shot to win your conference, shot to beat your rival, shot to win the national championship, that's really good. The biggest thing to me, two of the biggest things to me, Jeff, overall, the team, there's a lack of player development under Ryan Day. That's clear and evident across the board. Also, there's a clear sign that something is possibly wrong with the strength and conditioning program. And it's not just the guys that are getting injured, which that's a part of it. See, like late in big games, the Buckeyes just don't have the gas, don't have the juice to do that. Yes, the Utah game is one thing. But if you take JSN off the team, Ohio State loses that game in the Rose Bowl to Utah, who played a running back at DB. So you just talk about keeping it in context. I'm going B+, you go B-. At the end of the season, Jeff, if there's another loss to Michigan, you and I might say it's time to go.
Yeah,
get somebody else in here.
There's no such thing. No such thing.
Not at all. Jeff Hunt, fun to have you back on the show, man. If you could let everyone know where they can follow you on Twitter. And if you're on any podcasting, I know you're retired, semi-retired, but you still do some podcasts every now and then. Where can they catch those?
I'm at jhunt006 on Twitter. I'm still very active on that. I still, love all the sports. I love the NBA playoffs, everything that's going on. And I just did a show with one of my Off the Ball Network teammates, Stuart Brooking. That's all Morning Brew with Stu. And we're doing a 8-week, series of quarterback rankings. We go through 4 each week in the NFL. As far as that's really fun to look at. And then of course, just go check out, any of the content that are coming out off the Ball Network over there. It's really cool. And I pop up every now and then, I'm not dead yet.
And guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send all of your emails to jstevens317@gmail.com. Thanks for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen every day. Now is the perfect time to go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's the perfect place for you to get all your sports news and information in and around the world of sports in 20 minutes or less every single day. Locked On Buckeyes is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Locked On Buckeyes here on a Thursday, we'll be back on Monday talking about your Ohio State Buckeyes. There's a big announcement from the Big Ten. We'll be discussing what they announced regarding the scheduling of football games in the future coming up next week. For Jay Stevens here on a Thursday, I am the host. This is our guest for the day, Jeff Hunt. I'll see you next time.